Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Kelsey Neff, writer, activist, entrepreneur, founder of By Design Consulting, and she improves company culture by focusing on systems and people. Welcome to the show, Kelsey.
Thanks, AJ. Thanks for having me here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Kelsey. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the world will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll learn from you how to transform workplace culture. But before that, let's learn a bit more about you, your background, your journey, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Yeah, so I started my career in nonprofit management and community development. So I worked there for about 10 years and had the most amazing opportunities. I really, really loved those industries. I worked with lots of different communities. I helped develop team dynamics. I worked with new leaders, got to have a lot of great opportunities. Professional development was a huge passion of mine when I worked in that industry. And it was really amazing. I learned so much. It was the perfect foundation for my career. And then but the problem with nonprofit industry, as so many industries, is that because everyone is kind of over capacity and under resourced, it allows for just a lot of issues to occur. So there's a lot of toxicity in some of the workplace cultures. There's really poor leadership because leaders are just overwhelmed with everything that they have to do and manage. Lots of miscommunications happen, poor team dynamics, high turnover, just kind of all of the issues that we see with toxic workplaces are really, really prevalent in a lot of nonprofits. So I found that my last maybe 2 or 3 years working at the company that I worked at, all I wanted to do was just fix problems. All I wanted to do was just figure out a way to help us do what we do better and more sustainably, right? So I kept talking about we need to work on our retention. We need to work on our recruitment. We need to figure out how to give people opportunities so that they stay. We need to figure out how to create more healthy communication. So I was constantly just trying to fix problems. And I found that I feel like my passion is really in this, right? It's in identifying those problems, trying to come up with strategies to fix them, and work with people to get them the resources they need to do that. So I left the nonprofit industry and I started my company in 2021. So By Design Consulting is a professional consulting firm. And I like to say that we help leaders lead more effectively and teams work together more efficiently. So we work in the area of workplace climate and culture. We do assessment and evaluation to just help companies figure out really what the root issues are of why, people aren't staying in their companies, why they're having high turnover, why their leaders are struggling, and develop some really practical solutions that are going to help them really get to the next level and get momentum in their company.
Absolutely. So let's look at this term called company culture. Company culture, what is company culture? And who defines? Is it like some, software platform, software thing that you upload, and then that is the first thing, and then you keep on updating it? Then who does that? Or is it that it develops on its own? That's why I asked, what is company culture if we look at it in today's time? If I go start a startup in 2025, what would be the company culture? How would you know what company culture we are putting, which version we have put it in place?
Yeah, great question. So company culture it's an interesting term because it's this kind of ethereal, what is it, right? It's this kind of unknown thing. And every company has it, whether they're intentional about it or not. And I always say that it's really, really dangerous if you're not intentional, because then it develops without your oversight. So company culture is a combination of two things. So I like to say that it's your people and your policies. So it's both the people that you employ, the types of candidates that you're looking for to develop your team, definitely who you put in leadership positions, the traits that they have, the way that they work. That's really, really crucial to company culture. But then it's also your policies. So it's what is your outlook on giving employees time off for holidays, right? So do you have culturally responsive holidays? It's also how you respond when a employee needs to take a leave of absence because they have a sick family member, right? Are you a really people first company culture? Are you a really results oriented company culture, right? Do you expect people to just show up and work and leave and, kind of put their human needs to the side? So company culture is just that feeling that employees have when they're working for you, right? So it's what makes people want to work for you, and definitely what makes people want to stay working for you, for sure. And I always say that it's really important to put some intention into both your people and policies. Otherwise, those things are going to develop without your control and oversight. And that's how we get really toxic cultures.
Right. And how does it become a not so good company culture? Because by the time when it begins, then there is nothing much in place. But a good company culture also, germinates. That seed takes place.
Mm.
But with time, there are many people to look at, many people to look at the company, many people to look at the brand identity, many people to look at within. There is the HR, there are the managers, there is the CEO, there are so many people. Then when does it become bad, and who lets it become bad? Do we ever, do you ever try and analyze this as a company, that when was the moment in time that this germ got hold of into this company and started eating it from inside? How do we understand that?
Definitely. Yeah, I like to say that culture is everybody's job to perpetuate, but really it starts with the leader. So it starts with who's ever at the top of the organization, setting that tone and creating the type of environment they want to create for their employees. And then from there, it's everybody's job to kind of perpetuate, hopefully, a safe and responsive company culture. But toxic cultures can get out of hand so quickly and so easily. And it really can start, I always like to say it starts with poor leadership. If there's not somebody at the top that's really protecting or creating that culture, you get a couple, maybe quote unquote, bad employees or grumpy employees or whatever, unhappy employees in there. And that is going to spread like a virus so quickly. Toxicity spreads very, very quickly. And if the company culture or the organization itself is already kind of weak or susceptible to that, you have this huge group of people that are kind of, they're the silent majority, right? So you have outspoken people that are usually pretty toxic. You have outspoken people that are pretty positive. Those people are the minorities. You have the large group of people that are a silent majority that can kind of be swayed either way. And so if you have toxicity that's starting to spread, that's going to spread to that majority really easily. So on the opposite side, if the majority of the organization is really positive, right, and we have people that are really happy with their jobs and they're really satisfied with their jobs and they like where they work, if you get a couple of those toxic employees, they're not going to last very long, because either they're a toxic person that likes to spread toxicity, they're not going to thrive in that environment, or they're just kind of unhappy. Maybe they're coming from a really bad environment, but then they're going to be able to adapt and be able to understand that they're in a new environment that is healthy. So it definitely is the leader's responsibility at the top to kind of set the tone for what kind of culture they want to create. But then it's everybody's job from there to perpetuate it and to protect that culture.
Right. So why don't leaders, uh, nip it in the bud? Why don't they do it when the toxic culture starts taking its first roots? Why do they? Because it works for them, that they get all those sycophants within the system because they are poor leaders. Is it because they are having their own issues? They have just got some good degree from some fancy college, and the company thinks they would be a great leader. Help us understand, because the leader will not tell that about himself, and nobody else has the courage to say it. So what leads is the great resignation and the quiet quitting. And one day the leader quits, gets on to another company, and the company culture, it's like a very good well of water, but it's all contaminated and not fit for anybody's use. How do you help in these situations when the problem is with the person who has to keep the things going? Is it an easy job for you? Can you tell those people that, listen, you are the problem and you should have been kicked out long back? Help us understand in that backdrop.
Yeah, it's a really tricky dynamic, because oftentimes it's interesting because the employees at the company always see a great need to bring in somebody like me, but the leaders sometimes have a hard time accepting it or admitting it, because it's hard. It's hard on our egos. It's really hard on your confidence as a leader to be told that you're not doing a good job. It's a difficult thing, and I think that's why I think like leadership is such a it's a calling. I believe that in order to do it well, you really, really have to come to it with an air of humility and be open to hearing those things and be open to working on it. And I think the reason why we see such poor leadership in a lot of companies is that leaders don't do that. And oftentimes we do hire for performance, right? So we promote people because they're good at, if we're at a coffee shop, they're a great barista. So we're like, cool, let's promote them to a leadership position. But the reality is because you're a great barista, just because you're a great barista does not mean you'll be a great leader. And we often don't hire for leadership skills. We hire for performance skills. And that's a huge problem as well, because then you go into a leadership job thinking that you're great and you're amazing, when in reality, learning what you have to learn to be a good leader requires a great, great amount of humility and being humble. So oftentimes leaders, I think it does have to kind of get pretty sticky before they'll be like, okay, we have a problem. we need to look at this and we need to fix some of these things. And the point when leaders get to, when they have that, it's this pivotal point where either they are going to learn, they're going to hear it, they're going to be like, okay, let's work on this, or they're going to quit. And then whoever is, if it's a board of directors, whoever is at the top of that organization can then bring in a leader that is more responsive to it. Hopefully they're looking to hire somebody that will be willing to kind of hear these things, will be willing to fix these things, and will be willing to really listen to their employees and work on some of those issues that we saw in the first place.
Right, Kelsey. So how do you speak? You say you focus on two things: systems and people. What's the fault of the system here? When it's a person's fault, or a couple of persons, or a few persons' fault? Help us understand, how do you get started in such a situation when the leaders is sort of toxic? It's a wrong culture. And also you talk about company culture as well as company climate. Mm-hmm. It's like we're talking about weather, and then we are talking also about the climate. So are some companies where this toxic climate persists and we are fools to join such companies? In that direction, help us. How do you start your job? How do you get into the system? How do you make an impact? We'll come to your book also after this.
Yeah. So I like to say that climate is the diagnosis. So climate is when you go to the doctor and the doctor is like, these are all the things that are wrong, right? So these are all the issues. So climate is the diagnosis of, okay, we're having issues with retention, we're having issues with leadership, we're having issues with team dynamics, right? We're having conflict in the team. We're having issues with a lot of employees calling out all of the time. That's another huge indicator of a toxic culture, if people constantly are calling out, using a lot of sick time. So that's the diagnosis. So climate is like, this is where the things are not working, or maybe this is where things are great on the other side, right? This is where things are going really good. And then culture is the prescription. So culture is how we fix those things. So we look at what are the systems, again, so what does your employee handbook look like, right? What are your employee rights? Do your employees understand what their rights are and their responsibilities are as a member of this organization? What does your retention and recruitment plan look like? How are you training people? How are you supporting people? So looking at all of these systems in play that you just have as a part of your organization, how is that either helping or hurting your climate, right? So is it really built to help people succeed and to give people the resources that they need to do a good job? Or is it preventing people from doing that? And oftentimes we see that one of the biggest indicators are training and resources, and leadership. Those are the two huge things that are always issues in companies, because people don't take the time to really train people adequately for the job. I often hear, especially in the leadership world, I'll hear employees or first-time managers say, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I got thrown into this leadership thing. I got no support. I got no training. And I'm just expected to figure it out on my own, when it's a really hard journey to figure out on your own. So those are the two biggest things that I see a lot, is leadership and training and support come through very, very strongly as not the company not putting enough focus on those two areas to really help their employees succeed. And that really, really creates a very damaging culture, because it communicates to your employees that you don't value them. You don't value them as advocates, or you don't value them as active components of your organization. You don't value them as people that want to thrive and grow and learn. and you don't support them in that leadership capacity to be able to do that. So I like to say climate is the diagnosis, culture is the prescription.
Right, right. So, assuming all these people, in leadership position, they're very good people, very good human beings, and they have been thrown into that position. They only want the salary of the leadership position and not the responsibility, perhaps. But be that as it may, if they're very good people, what is it that, knowingly, unknowingly, they're making some mistakes, especially into maybe in the first year of their job at any place? What are the few things that they can avoid doing or not doing?
Great question. Yeah, that first year is really, really crucial. That first year of leadership is huge. It's where people struggle the most. It's definitely such a different job. It's a different role. So people really do struggle. I think the biggest mistake that first-time managers make is they don't take the time to understand the dynamics of the team they're working on before making changes. So we go in super strong. Day one, we're like, here's everything we're changing. This is what we're doing. This needs to improve. I'm going to fire that person. I'm going to change this. I'm going to do that. And that is so damaging for team morale, right? So it's really, really overwhelming for that team that you just took over. It's just the highest level of arrogance to come into a team and assume that you know everything on day one. So I like to say that your first 90 days of being a new leader is all about learning. It's all about learning, understanding, asking questions, getting to know people, really working to understand all of the dynamics of the team that you work in, especially if it's a new company that you just started at, really, really just getting to know why things are the way they are, how they got there, what the systems are, and the root of them before making any changes at all. So I say that's the first mistake that first-time managers make, is they just come in way too strong, way too determined to just change everything. But the reality is they don't understand it enough to be able to change it. So I like to say your first 90 days, you just work on understanding, and then you can get to actually assessing and figuring out what needs to be shifted. Another mistake that I think first-time managers make is they come in, there's two kind of opposite ends in the way that people come in as their personality. So they either want to be best friends with their team. So they're just like cool and they're the cool boss and they're like hanging out and drinking with their employees and just like chatting at lunches, and they want to be liked. So they come in really as like a friend versus a leader. Or it's the opposite, where they're like, I am the boss, and they create this huge divide between them and their team. They don't make themselves accessible. They don't make themselves relatable. So you have to find that middle ground of being able to get to know your team, relate to your team, build relationships with your team, but also still establish that like you are the one that's going to take care of things. You're the one that's going to support them and help them and help them grow in whatever ways they want to grow. So it's finding that kind of sweet spot in the middle of not becoming best friends, but not being too hard. And then the last thing I'll say is that the other thing is that leaders tend to not delegate, right? So they tend to want to prove themselves. So they'll take on everything, they'll do everything, and then they get overwhelmed, right? So nobody can maintain that level of performance. So you burn out really quickly as a new leader, but it also sets really high expectations for your team, and they burn out as well. So kind of coming in just too much, doing too much, wanting to do too much to take it all on, and not delegate and not be able to give your team opportunities to take on some of that as well.
Right. Lots of learning for leaders here, and lots of learning for a lot of people who want to be leaders, and also for a lot of people who are managing their organizations. So let's learn a bit from your book, 52 Weeks of Impact. Who is this? Tell us a bit about your book. Who is this book for?
Yeah. So when I started my company, I thought I would be working with, the C-suite executives. I thought I'd be working with HR managers and the people at the top. And so I started posting a lot of content on social media, and who really registered with my content was first-time managers. It was people who were very new into the position. And I got so many comments and so many messages of people just saying, please help me. I am drowning. I have no support. I have no resources. I don't know what I'm doing. So I decided to write a book. So I just wanted to write a book to really support those people that are in their first year. So 52 Weeks is both a guidebook and a resource manual for first-time managers. So every chapter is a different month in your first year. So it talks about different things that you may encounter in that month. But then it's also part guided journal. So there's questions at the end to help you kind of document as you're going through your first year, record milestones that you're going through, record challenges that you're going through. So it's a cool way at the end of your year to be able to look back and look and see how far you've grown. So, things that I struggled with in month 2 are now not even a big deal anymore. So the first year of leadership just goes by so quickly. So this was really a way to both support new managers, give them some resources, give them some information that may help them in those first couple of months, but then also as a way for them to have something that's going to document this huge milestone in their life.
Absolutely. There is much to learn from you. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you. A lot of budding leaders would like to connect with you and learn from you, from your book. What is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, you can find me a couple places. I am on Instagram. I do post almost daily, information about leadership, company culture, all of that. So I'm at By Design Consulting _BDC. So that's a little annoying, but _BDC, By Design Consulting on Instagram. My website is bydesignconsulting.space, SPACE. And then I'm also on LinkedIn just under Kelsey Neff. So they can find me anywhere. I'd love to connect with anyone that's interested.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.